they're all, in that range, much smaller today. So these real big guys, they're difficult for somebody who's 5'11", 220 pounds to beat, but they're not that compelling to watch. I don't mind the Klitschko's or Vladimir now. The Vitaly's retired. I don't mind watching them. I mean, they knock everybody out. But, it's more of a historical fixation. All of those old greats, Rocky Marciano, Joe Louis, Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, all of those guys that everybody remembers and hears about. But the truth is, I actually, for a long time, prefer anything below heavy, not just because it hasn't been a good division for a long time, but because you can come into these heavyweight fights grossly out of shape, and it happens all the time. It's a lot harder to come into a fight at 147 out of shape.
Exactly. And, well, I won't go there right now, but that's one question that I just wanted to get your input on as well was, what's your thoughts on how fighters are managing, choosing a weight class, sticking around in a weight class? And I'll point to Triple G as one example. He seems like a guy who could possibly go up and chase some bigger fights or make the fight happen with Andre Ward or Kovalev. But it seems like he's held on to aspirations of getting a fight with Floyd possibly at 154. I know Junior, Cesar Chavez Jr., he's bounced all over the place, be it in a reckless fashion. But do you think it's based on money? Am I trying to have are these guys trying to have a market advantage over, smaller guys that come up to them? Is it kind of getting out of control? Is this something that needs to be reined in? Maybe some of these weight classes combined or something, but what's your thoughts there on what we're seeing with the high number of catch weight fights?
Yeah, I think maybe those are two different issues, but there shouldn't be, right? I think there's already too many weight divisions. You have a weight division every 3 or 4 pounds. There used to be like 8 of them. It wasn't easy to bounce all around, right? You had to go from 147 to 160 to 175. And they're not every 3 or 4 pounds. Guys were Sperry. You had your Paul Williams or your Golovkins who had trouble getting fights but could make a variety of weights just based on the way they were built. They're just trying to get paid. They're trying to make fights. I don't really blame them for bouncing around. You have guys who are basically too big for a division, trying to get smaller guys to come up and fight the catch weights to gain an advantage. You have guys, Arturo Gatti years ago, he steadily came up in weight, and his career effectively ended because he couldn't carry his power from 140 to 147, and he couldn't make 140 anymore, and he was getting pounded by far lesser fighters, at 147 for his last couple of fights, and he didn't have any more options. So those are all reasons, some of them more valid than others. I don't like to see it abused where guys are trying to move around to gain competitive advantage. I don't mind the guy who says, hey, I'll fight anyone from 154 to 168.
Yeah, that's just, I don't know, it's just problematic for me as a fan. But moving on, we can just, a quick note, I thought you retweeted an article a couple days ago about Tomas Adamek returning to the ring, and he was a guy that I didn't realize that he only had the 4 losses, but he's a guy that went up from light to heavyweight all the way up to heavyweight, fought Vitaly Klitschko, and ended in a 10th round TKO. But I look at this guy's record, man, and he's just fought everybody. I've seen him in some bad spots and put it back together and get a win. To me, he's just a fight fan's fighter. He's I don't know what he has left in the tank at this point because of some of the battles that he's been in, but he's a respectable fighter.
Yeah, very, very good fighter. He wasn't really a heavyweight. He moved up to heavyweight to chase a dream and probably money. He has a win over Areola. None of his losses are really bad losses. He lost to Dawson when Dawson was a world beater. He lost to Vitaly Klitschko. He was so outsized in that fight. He got knocked out in a TKO in the 10th round. It was probably his most lopsided loss. He's lost a couple recently to lesser guys, Glaskov and fight. I hope that he's not out there getting knocked out for paychecks for the next 5 years, you know.
Yeah, I put him in the same group as I put Shane Mosley in. I mean, I really wish that Shane would stay retired, but he seems to think with the time away from the ring, he seems to think that he can resume a career. But I'm just hoping with both of these guys, maybe you have a 2 or 3, maybe no more than 3 fights, but maybe you have a plan to either make it work financially or maybe beat a named fighter that kind of will allow you to say, you know what, I went out at the top of my game. I mean, things may have ended a little badly for Shane and his vision of himself as a fighter. But like I said, I hope nobody is really trying to replicate what Hopkins is doing, because he's made it look pretty easy fighting up into 50, but I just don't think a lot of these fighters were as fundamentally defensively sound. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, I just don't think everybody can do what he's doing.
No, and Adam X, a guy who's taken a lot of punches over the years.
A lot.
And he hasn't really looked great in recent years. I mean, he got this win a couple of weeks ago. You know, he lost 2 fights before that. He beat Steve Cunningham right at the end of 2012 on the cards, but he got a split decision. Looked like he completely lost that fight. Most people thought, wow, that was some pretty bad scoring. So when you're looking back to good wins, you're starting to look back 3 and 4 years. I mean, Cunningham's a great win on paper, but he probably didn't win that fight. So, he beat Eddie Chambers in 2012, and he lost to Klitschko in 2011. Well, you're starting to talk about a long time ago for a 38-year-old fighter. He's not getting better at this point.
Yeah, he had wins against Bell, Jonathan Banks, who we mentioned earlier, Michael Grant. He beat Areola, too, I believe, right?
Yep.
So,
like
I said, yeah, he's had a pretty phenomenal career. So, like you said, I hope he shuts it down in a respectable fashion, and I hope it's just not a money thing for him. But, we'll see. I'm going to take one last break before we get into this Fanfara Cleverly fight and then finish up with the big one. So, give me just a second.
We are One Take Podcast Nation, bringing you quality on-demand audio in sports, entertainment, lifestyle, and more. You have podcasts from B. Meeks, Jim Shoe Johnny, show host Wood, and host of others from around the country. No matter what your sport is, we have it covered. So check us out on OneTakePodcast.com. Or if you want to go straight to our podcast channel, visit www.otpn.us. That's otpn.us. Sponsors and podcasters are always welcomed.
All right, we're back with the Pay Me No Mind show. This is your host, Wood. I'm on with special guest James at Boxing Genius. That's at Boxing Genius with a J-N-E-N-I-U-S. The pugilist specialist. You can check him out on Twitter. Has some pretty good tweets and forwards along a lot of good information about the sweet science. So right now we'll kind of get into our own championship rounds, talking about this weekend's upcoming fights with I do not know how to pronounce Fanfara's first name. It looks like Andres or something, but he's going up against Nathan Cleverly. I just wanted to say that I really I've become a pretty big fan of Fanfara since checking him out against his fight against Adonis Stevenson. I feel like he's a durable guy. Once again, he seems kind of like Adamek. He's a fight fan's fighter. I mean, he's, I think in being in this era with Floyd Mayweather and watching the businessman, the promoter, and the fighter all in one package, it's good to see a guy like Fanfara who's just out here fighting the guys that are put in front of him and looking pretty good while doing it. Yep,
he's a good fighter. He's getting better. He got a win over Glenn Johnson a few years ago. He was on the Friday Night Fights circuit for a while. For those who were watching that, he's getting some bigger fights now. I'm glad to see it. He's got a good fan base in Chicago. I wanted to address my Twitter handle, by the way. It plays better in print than it does on the screen than it does on the podcast. I don't really fashion myself as a genius. It's spelled incorrectly. It's kind of a joke. Just wanted to say it because of the way it sounds. in this fight. He's a fun guy to watch. He had a great, he lost one of those classic moments where a guy really raises his stock in a loss. It was a pretty clear decision loss to Stevenson, but he really started to ding him up late. He really made him work for it. He wasn't expected to. It was supposed to be kind of an easy tune-up for Stevenson. Cleverly passed on fighting Brahmer for who's considered probably the weakest title holder at 175 to take this fight. Interesting choice. I think that Fonfara is going to be too big and strong for Cleverly.
Yeah, Cleverly's one of those guys. I've probably seen him fight once or twice. I see he split a couple of matches with Tony Bellew. He has a win over Carpensy, and he fourth round TKO to Kovalev. I just really haven't seen a whole lot of him. Fonfara seems to be a guy who, like you said, raised his stock in a loss or in defeat. Got up off the mat against Stevenson, and like you said, really nicked him up pretty good and got on the offense, and even taunted him a little bit. But mainly, I really appreciated him. I like when fighters really behave as fighters, to take a phrase out of Tony Atlas's playbook. But to see him really just have total disdain for Cesar Chavez Jr. to show up in the ring kind of out of shape, and to think that he could come up 2 weight classes and just call him out and be successful against him. So I really thought that was a great showing for him, that really put him on, that kept him on the one to watch for list when he when he just took care of Chavez.
Yeah, and gave him the first knockdown in his career and stopped him. And if nothing else, he's got a great chin, Chavez. So it was an incredible showing, and I think that you're gonna basically see him walk down Cleverly and beat him into submission in this fight. The problems for Cleverly go beyond this fight when you think about where he's at. So he's fighting at light heavyweight, and we're trying to find out if Fonfara can get up to the A level, or if he's a kind of a B plus level guy. Cleverly's kind of shown that he's a B plus guy. When you look at the class of the division, and it's a great division. You've got Stevenson, Kovalev, Beterbiev, Pascal. I don't see him beating any of those guys. So, and I don't see him beating Fonfara either. But even if he did, where does he go? He tried going up to cruiserweight for a couple of fights. That didn't really turn into anything. I doubt he can go down. Maybe he can squeeze a couple decent paydays out of this thing, but before theirs. But where does he really go? He's kind of stuck in the middle, and maybe even if he wins this fight, I don't know what next move he has. Is he going to get which guy's going to get knocked out by? I guess.
That's an interesting quandary when a fighter gets in that position where you don't really have a weight class, and like you said, you can't beat the top tier guys at a particular division or 2 particular divisions. So that's kind of one of the, to your point earlier at the beginning of the show, that's to me is one of the interesting stories in boxing is, these guys, this is probably all they do. This is their livelihood. And you hit that ceiling, and what do you do? And so that's an interesting thing to keep an eye out for on Cleverly. But that was an interesting development a couple of weeks ago when Marco Huck was a guy I've seen the name for years, and then he finally has his U.S. debut, which was another great PBC card. And I can't remember his opponent's name off the top of my Wozniak or something, or Wozniak, but he had knocked the guy down, and then the guy came back later in the fight and knocked out a long-time reigning champ, and Huck knocked him out in the 11th round. So maybe Cleverly can just put it together somehow to have at least one great night in the spotlight.
Yep. Well, one more great night is might